Hello once again. This is Some Idiot Reads, and my name is Cy. I'm Some Idiot. Gonna go ahead and continue on today with what's become kind of a regular here. I mean, at the moment, I'm on the off weekends. I'm chewing my way through Emma Goldman's Anarchism and Other Essays. Highly recommend checking it out. It's fairly topical recently. But that I don't want to call that a regular thing. One thing I'm definitely very much enjoying continuing to spread the word of is the works of the amazing, the fantastical, the humorous, and the uncouth. Man, he's way better at doing these than me. Coyote Wallace. The Jesus. As I say often, can you tell I don't script these? He is the author of a truly fantastic novel. Do I still have it on my desk? I do. And I will continue to extol the virtues and the wonderment of... Oh, wow, it's actually doing it nicely this time. American Mystic. The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful. Go buy yourselves a copy. It's on Amazon, both available in digital format as well as a beautiful softback. Buy yourselves a copy. Buy your friends a copy. Buy your enemies a copy. Buy a random stranger a copy. Get your library to pick it up and carry it. It is wonderful. It is true gonzo in the Hunter S. Thompson sense of the word. Gonzo urban fantasy is, I believe, how it would be done. Low fantasy? Anyway, it is a fantastic read. Highly recommend it. Check him out. In addition to that, always go forward and check out his Dispatches from Appalachia on Medium. Link will be in the description. And that is what we will be reading from today. You can see right here, there are so many articles that this man has in here. Love them all. And if you're curious, there are also some more readings with his blessing available here on the channel. Feel free to check those out. But seriously, go over to his Medium page. Give him a follow. It's right over here. Give him a follow. Toss some money in his tip jar. Go with that. If you enjoyed his work, go do that. If you enjoyed me reading his work, go give him money, because all I am is just some idiot with a voice, okay? He's the one doing the content. So go on, go do it, show him some love. What we have got for today, it has been brought to my attention from at least one quarter, I love you, Mom, that some of these have gone a little over long. So while traditionally I've tried to go for, an hour to an hour and a half on these, I'm going to try and go ahead and limit it on down as much as I can. In the case of Anarchism and Other Essays, been doing just one chapter at a time. And in the case of this, for Coyote's Dispatches, I'm just going to read one. That's all I'm going to do. That way it'll be nice and short. I'm going into these raw. I have not read these before. Well, I've read some of these, but whenever I'm going in to read one of these, it is not one I have read before. So we'll see what we get with it. That said, this is a relatively recent one of his. The Despicable Dandy, The Fair Maiden, and The Outlaw. Originally published on October 28th, 2024. A little under 2 months ago. Under 2 months ago? Wait, October, a little over 2 months ago. So let's see what we've got with this. We start off with a very stoic, no-nonsense looking coyote. Beautiful, goodest boy. All right, let's see. There we go. Okay, we're good. Manners, as one might imagine, are an important part of an Appalachian upbringing. You don't talk back to your mama. You don't leave the door open like you were raised in a barn. You hold the door open for the next person, and you say hi, or at least nod when you pass someone on the street. There's scarcely an Appalachian alive who hasn't been scolded, at least once, by their mama for being a wild little heathen running to and fro. We ain't perfect, but unless you were raised at the head of some holler and turned near feral, you know how to behave. This instilling of manners is probably why I find Mr. Trump, I will not call him President Trump, as he abdicated that title the moment he led an insurrection in our country, so despicable. He has many crimes, many awful deeds, done for his own appetites or gains, both political and monetary. There's the hush money case. Yes, from the time the leader of the quote-unquote party of family values paid off a porn star to avoid disclosing the vast differences between himself and Arnold Palmer. Then there's that time back in 2005 when he openly bragged about assaulting women, was caught on tape, and Access Hollywood handed that tape to the world. The Republican Party's response? I identify with this. Let's not forget, and as a gonzo journalist, this one's extra special to me, by which I mean Coyote, the time famed journalist and author E. Jean Carroll successfully sued Donald J. Trump for sexual abuse. By the way, Donald, just because the godfather of gonzo isn't here anymore, someone still needs to say it. You degenerate, baby-handed, godless fucking swine. If there's an afterlife, you can bet there'll be one good old Louisville boy waiting on you, Bubba. The list goes on and on. Failed responses to COVID that cost the lives of innocent Americans, shameless attempts to roll back fundamental human and civil rights, open and wanton lying without any regard for who it harms. I honestly don't have the time or inclination to dig further, because there are just so many. There's literally a Wikipedia page, link is included in the text here, dedicated purely to the controversies of Donald J. Trump. And it is overflowing with his bullshit. Yet, it's the way he speaks to people that really sticks in my old yipper. I know men like that. I've seen them, and I've seen them dealt with in these mountains by the most unlikely of sources. See, a man who will run down women and children, who will speak without caring what harm his words bring, that ain't much of a man. For the sake of his own manners, decisive action must be taken. Sometimes, to get someone to stop talking shit, you just gotta slap the shit right out of them. Strap in. It's about to get weird. My neighborhood, growing up, was what some might call the wrong side of the tracks. The law rarely came around, the people here rarely called on them, and there were certain enterprises that served to bolster the local economy and kept us wild young punks from burning down the nearest town. So it should come as no surprise that our stretch of nowhere had its own, how do I put this without getting in trouble? Community figure. We're going to call him the Outlaw for the purposes of today's story. Our outlaw was, and still is, widely feared. A lean man with sharp, dark eyes, and a face that could send us young punks scurrying like mice from the cat with just a scowl. We'd all grown up hearing legends and tales of his exploits, and we'd even seen the aftermath of a few instances where the harsh lessons of the mountains had been dealt to those who thought themselves beyond his reach. A master horseman, damn fine shot with both pistol and rifle, keeper of the neighborhood peace, and a believer in the simple truth that a man is only as good as his word. My mother once told me that he took a beating and was hung by his wrists over the big sandy river at the hands of the law, all because he refused to give up his friends. I can't name a single man from the quote-unquote lawful parts of this state who I think would have done the same. We feared him, but more than that, we respected him. For a young coyote, it was the outlaw's honor that was most aspirational. None of us wanted to be firemen, lawmen, astronauts, or soldiers. We wanted to be the outlaw. Now, as it came to pass, somewhere in my early 20s, I was in the midst of a particularly fine bout of drunken debauchery. I roamed from party to party, get-together to get-together, and with me was, of course, my usual assortment of malcontents. At one particular gathering, a barbecue hosted by a local man named Philip and his wife, the whole neighborhood showed up. This was not unusual, as any gathering that didn't take place on top of a strip job or in some forgotten corner of the mountains always brought together those of us with a taste for the quote-unquote good times. The stage for our tale is a single wide trailer set on a sloping hill that fed down to a one-lane road. On the other side of the road was a barbed wire fence, meant more to keep people out of the pasture beyond than to keep any animals in. The place was maybe a mile, 2 at most, from the neighborhood proper. Far enough back you couldn't see the main road anymore, and at night, if you could shut your yap for 10 seconds, you could hear the sounds of the mountains. There was Jacob Lee and his brother Robbie, both of whom I've written about extensively in previous dispatches. By the time we reached our 20s, they'd settled into their ways. Jacob was quieter now, more firmly in the grip of party favors that seemed to be an endless supply on those warm velvet nights in Appalachia. Robbie, on the other hand, was always hunting for someone's bad decision, though he failed more often than not. Then there was Philip's brother-in-law, Vance, infamous for possum fighting, which is when you stop your truck in the dead of night, hop out, grab a possum by the tail, and fling it off the road, without getting mauled, of course. Candy Lee, Jacob and Robbie's sister, was there too, along with her boyfriend at the time, a young horse trainer we'll call Mark. The night had just a hint of chill in the air, with fall fast approaching. A large fire pit crackled in the backyard, and I can still remember the sound of it chewing through the logs, the embers twisting against the black canvas of night. My friends were with me, and none of us had thought beyond the revelry at hand. Before the night was even halfway through, Vance had gotten so drunk he couldn't stand, and ended up tumbling down the side of the hill, rolling with such force that when he hit the road, he kept going until he hit the barbed wire fence. I don't know who went down to get him, but it sure wasn't me. For the rest of the night, he looked like he'd been in a fight with a rabid bobcat. Stories were told, as young boys and young men do, tales ranging from fish caught to girls kissed and everything in between. We talked about cars we wanted, women we'd like to bed, and the places we dreamed of going. We had nothing better to do than waste our youth chasing good times, trying to shake the invisible chains that bound us to the land. But one detail that night changed everything. Old Mark was popular with the ladies. Handsome, tanned from working in the sun, with dark hair, greenish-brown eyes flecked with gold, and a perfectly maintained 5 o'clock shadow. Taking a pause to look at my own. Anyway. His boots were polished, his belt buckle gleamed, and every button was in place. Candy had been smitten with him for months, always talking about how purty he was, chasing after him like a duckling. She thought he was the one, but we all know better. He wasn't from our hollow. None of us liked him. Jacob tolerated him out of respect for their football days, and Robbie hated anyone Candy favored. That might not have been a problem at a party like this, but Mark kept forgetting where he was. Throughout the night, he insulted her, cutting comments about her intelligence, her work ethic, anything you could think of. Her brothers laughed, but most of us just kept quiet, waiting for someone else to step in. In the mountains, you don't get involved in another couple's disputes unless you're looking to get shot by a jealous husband. And the lulls between insults were just long enough to pretend it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Then she refused to drive to the liquor store to get him more beer. "You bitch, you stupid whore, you dumb cunt." On and on he went, right in her face, shouting the ugliest things you can imagine. Candy just took it, lips quivering like an old man catching a glimpse of his own mortality. Most folks at the party turned away, pretending nothing was wrong. Not the outlaw. He sat down next to me, rolling a joint between his gnarled fingers. Patiently, he went through each step, folding the paper, shredding the weed by hand. All the while, he kept his eyes on Mark and Candy, his face squinting into slits like an old gunslinger. The outlaw glanced over at Candy's brothers, lit the thumb-sized left-handed cigarette, and let the acrid smoke rise into the night. His face was an inscrutable mask of deep thought. "Swear to God, Candy, keep it up and watch what you get." Mark's voice rose to a reedy screech, high-pitched with frustration. The outlaw shook his head, muttering under his breath. You two are sorrier than owl shit. The outlaw turned to me, all but thrust the joint in my hand, and stood up. I didn't dare take a toke. The air itself felt charged, like the moment before a storm. I watched him turn on his heel, head cocked slightly, as he began to slowly close in on Mark and Candy's argument. Off to my right, Robbie and Jacob exchanged a look. I don't know what he expected us to do about it, Robbie muttered. She'll just crawl back to him or find someone worse. I barely heard them. My eyes were glued to the scene unfolding before me. The outlaw, a man who police would call a criminal, and whose very appearance would scare the hell out of city folk, walked right up to the pair in the middle of that party. His presence, more than anything, quieted Mark's tirade. The dandy boy horse trainer looked up and smiled, oblivious. Hey, how you do? That's all he got out. Whap! The first slap hit like a thunderclap. It wasn't a punch, just a sharp, open-handed slap, but it turned Mark's legs to melted butter. He crumpled to the ground at the outlaw's feet, his eyes blinking rapidly, as if his brain was struggling to catch up with what just happened. Get up, you little motherfucker. Mark, 20 years younger than the outlaw, still had some fire in him. He wasn't used to humiliation, especially not from someone like the outlaw. His face twisted with confusion and anger as he scrambled back to his feet. All right, now listen here. I don't want to fight, but if you think... I don't know if that was nearly as effective as saying whap. I feel that was a really sad slap on my own hand. Anyway. The second slap came just as fast. Again, no punch. Just another open palm slap that nearly spun Mark's head right around. His legs gave out beneath him once more, and he was left staring up at the black velvet sky. Whatever bravado he had, whatever pride he clung to, evaporated after that second hit. Mark raised his head, but his body didn't seem to remember how to follow. Take out your keys, you little shit, the outlaw growled, paying no mind to Candy or the rest of us. Huh? Mark stammered, his thoughts slow as cold molasses. What do you mean? I mean, give her your fucking keys, or do I need to knock the shit out of you again? None of us doubted the outlaw would do it. No one moved. The conversations had dried up, beer sat warming in our hands, and the joint smoldered, sending a curl of smoke into the air above my head. The two men were little more than shadows against the orange glow of the bonfire, but we could hear every word. Mark struggled to his feet again, one hand pressed to his cheek. His black hair was disheveled, and he looked less like a horse trainer now and more like a plucked chicken. I'm not letting her drive me home, Mark grumbled, but he was already pulling out his keys. She can't drive for shit. I don't give a fuck. Give her the keys, the outlaw said, his voice as steady as ever. He tilted his head slightly, looking down his nose at Mark. Or I'll put you back in the ground. On the ground, not in the ground. That was me misspeaking as a reader. Mark looked over at us, the whole party staring, and pulled the keys from his pocket, handing them to Candy like a reproachful toddler forced to share. Fine, we'll leave. Come on, Candy. The outlaw shook his head. No. She's staying to have a good time. You are walking home. There was no shouting, no posturing. The outlaw stood before Mark as unyielding as an old sycamore. When Mark realized what was demanded of him, his eyes widened. The outlaw stepped forward, closing the already small space between them. To his credit, despite being knocked flat on his ass twice and being born a no-good piece of shit, Mark held his ground. I'm not walking all the way home from here in the dark. We all tensed, expecting the next slap to send him crumbling again. But this time, there was no strike. The outlaw stared into Mark's eyes as if measuring the boy's inner metal. You'll walk it tonight, or you won't walk anywhere ever again. Mark glanced around, desperation clear. He wanted one of us to intervene, to talk some sense into the outlaw. It It was a long walk ahead in the dead of night, and he'd already been shamed in front of us all. But the outlaw did nothing, simply waiting in silence. Slowly, Mark stepped around him and slunk off into the night, tail tucked between his legs like a whipped dog. The outlaw watched him disappear into the darkness, then returned to his seat, took the joint, and carried on as if nothing had happened. Eventually, Candy left Mark, and her brothers never again showed such a lack of chivalry. The outlaw's rule over our little neighborhood continues even now. And as for Mark, well, we don't see him around these parts much anymore. Now, ask yourself this. If an outlaw from the wild hills of eastern Kentucky, meaner than a copperhead, tougher than shoe leather, and as scary as a mountain lion, can find one man's disgusting lack of manners worth acting on, what should our response be to Trump's behavior? Simple. We send him walking right back into the darkness that spawned him, tail tucked, ears ringing, and jaw stinging. That's what we do. A man who degrades others, who puts down women, or who speaks so vilely as to make anyone feel small, must be held accountable for his behavior. We vote the bastard back into the dark. Now, that is the end of the article, and honestly, that was fantastic. I absolutely loved that. Quick thing I do want to make note of is that, again, this was written on the 28th of October, shortly before what is, I'm just going to be perfectly straight on that one, an extraordinarily disappointing and, I suppose if I'm going to be gentle about it, fucking upsetting result to the election here in America. Pathetic is a good word. Fucking disgraceful would be a good set to also add on top of that and just kind of hang the hat on. Because, no, dude's a piece of shit. Utter and complete and total. If you need to have that explained to you, dude, I don't even know how to fucking help you. So, to the end of that article there, that hurts. That being said, the message is still very clear and accurate. And I think there's more than a little inspiration that can be drawn from something like this. I don't know about you listening to it, or if you go and read it yourself, but I've seen people like that. People that hung out with my family when I was growing up. There were people that were like that. I want to say my dad was like that, in all honesty. Or maybe he would have been more like that prior to his back breaking. He had 2 metal plates in his back, fell in the Mississippi. It was an entire thing. But, actually, no, I take it back. My dad was like that. Little story off to the side my dad told me about once. Way later on in life and all that. He was working as a bouncer at a bar. And the long and the short of it is, he got set up by the local police department. Because there was a police officer that was dating one of his girls, one of the waitresses at the bar, one of the bars he worked at. And, the officer was being a complete and total dick in the bar. My dad threw his ass out on the fucking gravel outside the police department. I mean, it was a small town. They didn't take kindly to that, and, arranged for a set of circumstances to happen where, said girl was working at one of the other bars, and he got a notice that there was some real nasty stuff starting to go down, and he hopped on his motorcycle I should say, drove his way over there, saw a crowd starting to surround this girl, jeering at her, doing something. Mind you, I myself did not witness this. I'm recalling the story and doing my own little bits of embellishment here and there. But this crowd, people surrounding her, jeering. She was feeling really threatened, and he drove his bike straight into that crowd, scattered them, parked it, climbed off, pulled out a couple of sets of knives, and stared every last one of them down. Of course, then the local police department showed up, broke it up, and were really hoping that he would have attacked somebody. Then they could have got him on something. They got him on other stuff at a later point in time. But it feels like I'm jumping around a little bit. I'm trying to be circumspect in some of the story here. But in any event, no, I understand those kind of people. I dream of that kind of person. Like what you are talking about in this one, Coyote, I feel that, dude. And there is a very strong, sincere inspiration to be had for an individual like that. Um, I can almost picture who this person was. At least the archetype of them, the energy of them. I love it. I respect the hell out of it. So yeah, that was the Despicable Dandy, the Fair Maiden, and the Outlaw. Uh, Again, one of the phenomenal works from the life and times of one Coyote Wallace. Gonzo journalist, humorist, published author. Go buy a copy of American Mystic. Do it now. Link in the description. And a genuine article. Fantastic person. Love you, dude. And I am Cy. I'm some idiot, and I read things. I also play games. My younger brother and I are also playing Satisfactory, and there's other crap over on the channel. Go, check it out. That stuff, feel free to give me all the credit for. This, go check out the medium, buy the book, do whatever, and, be like the Outlaw. I'm not sure if I should be suggesting that or not. I'm going to stick with it. Y'all take care. Bye.